What is up, my nerds? It is me, Marisa Mohi, and welcome to my channel. Let's do some reading journaling. Okay, so before we get too far into this, I do want to explain a couple things. First of all, do you see this chonky Moleskine? Ain't it great? I'm definitely not going to use that little tab that it came with, but thank you, Moleskine, for doing that. So basically, I am creating a reading journal, and the reason I am doing this is because I have wanted to track my reading, but I am not pleased with all the reading tracking options that are out there. So I know about Goodreads, I know about Storygraph, y'all can tell me about that till you're blue in the face. Sometimes you just want stuff to be analog, and that's totally fine. Also, I'll start a Goodreads account and then I'll delete it just because I don't like all the notifications, I don't like all the interactions, I don't like the platform at all. I know that Storygraph is a lot cooler and a lot of people prefer that to Goodreads. At the same time, I just don't want to mess with the digital stuff. Like, let a girl be off social media for a bit. So all I'm doing right now is setting up my reading journal. Now, this is not going to look like reading journals that you probably see a lot on YouTube, because I see a lot of people track stuff in their reading journal that doesn't seem relevant to me. So right now I'm just actually taping together the first two pages, like the messed up first two pages in the journal. I hate that. Like, you can't ever open it all the way. And of course I've got to make it, pretty with some of this fancy pants paper. So that's what I'm doing. I basically just want to make this notebook my own, and I want to use it to track the things about books that are important to me. Now, I think it's really important that I state up front that not every book is going to matter to me. That doesn't mean that the book itself doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. That doesn't mean that the writer didn't try hard, and it doesn't mean that I'm not necessarily learning something from that book, because as a writer, I learn from functionally every book I pick up. And I think that that is something that we need to kind of normalize as writers. You need to talk more about what you're learning from the books you're reading, because even if it's a really bad book, you can still learn something from it. So that's kind of what this journal is. It's more about me tracking what I read throughout the month and little thoughts I had while reading it. Plus, it's giving me, kind of an opportunity to use some creative craft supplies that I have. So everything you're seeing in this video is just stuff that I had lying around. And I wanted to get better about using that stuff. And that's one of my goals for 2021, to create kind of like artist dates through just the activities that I do on the regular. So if my reading journal is a place where I can track my reading, it is also a place where I can use up some creative supplies and have myself a good time. And that's what I'm gonna do. So I started off by doing this to the inside of the front cover. I know that there's a great page where you can put your contact information and all that stuff, but honestly, why not just make it your own if you can? So I'm trying to cut around this. It's very difficult. I'm not good with scissors. I'm not good with a lot of craft supplies, and I kind of just do everything a little bit slapdash, but that's my steez, and it's how I approach this sort of stuff, because in the end, I want it to be fun. I don't care if it's perfect. And if I can give you one little tip to make your 2021 go a little bit easier, it's to just have fun and don't care if it's perfect. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are just like, oh, I'm a perfectionist, I can't, everything has to look good. That's fine, but just know that perfectionism is a trauma response, and you're kind of using that to cover up something else. Sorry to call you out in my YouTube video, but that's what I'm gonna do in 2021. Sorry, gang. It's who I am these days. So for Christmas this year, my mom got me the Everyday Witch Tarot deck, and she also got me a print created by the artist. It's actually the Nine of Pentacles card, and I love it. And this little Ex Libris book plate right here was part of that, order. I think she gives them out to everybody who orders from her Etsy shop. So I knew I had to use this in my book journal, and I think it looks really cute on top of that fancy cardstock that I use on the interior of the book, and I'm just going to write my name right there so everybody knows. See, doesn't this look like way better than the Moleskine page? Now, my friends, it's time to get serious. So I want to use supplies, I want to have a good time, I want to touch glue with my fingers, I want to tear paper, I want to be all about the fun of creating with my reading journal. So what I'm doing right here is creating a page for January. So I'm going to do a header for every month, and then I'm going to write down a list of everything that I read that month, and then I'm going to do an entry for every book I read. So there will be no like super cutesy bookshelf spreads where you write down the name of every book you read, or I'm not going to track like how many pages each book was, and I'm not going to track like or do like big TBR lists. Like I just don't care. I don't have the energy for it. I wanted to use this book the way I wanted to use it, and I know that you get to do whatever you want, but honestly, sometimes you put something up on YouTube and then folks get in your comments section, they're like, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z like everybody else? Like, I feel like I shouldn't have to explain that. Like, this is my reading journal and it's not anybody else's, but I'm just going to say that up front. Like, this is my reading journal, it's not anybody else's, so this is why I do what I do. So right here, I'm just making my title page for January 2021. My goal is to just, have basically a log of all the books I've read, because I read a lot last year and I meant to like write it down and I never did. And one of my biggest fears is becoming kind of like my mom, in that she will pick up a book at the library and read it and then get, 75% of the way through it and then realize that she's already read it. So I don't want to do that as much as I can. Sorry, Mom. Don't mean to call you out. So that's kind of what the goal of this journal is, that, and to, make sure that I am paying attention as I'm reading, because as a kid, I started reading as an escape. That's mostly what I cared about. It wasn't so much about, the structure or the story itself. And now as a writer, I think it's really important that I take the escape, maybe not away, like I still want to have the escape, but I want to be conscious of the stories I've read. And I have a tendency to just kind of check out and read, and then when I'm done, that's kind of when I realize how I felt about the book. And, I'm not going to journal midway through a book. Probably not, honestly, like that sounds exhausting. But I don't know. I think just having this accountability will help me, kind of think more critically about what I'm reading, because I do think that there's a lot of books that come out and, they get really popular and maybe we're not as critical of them as we should be. This is not me, by the way, saying that you should watch every booktube channel that likes to do a hatchet job review. Like, I know that that's the cool thing these days that all the kids are up to, but I do think that when it comes to being critical of a book, you need to think of it in several ways, like from different perspectives and in different cultures and in different cultural theories. I think it's really important to just take a look. Not that I'm necessarily doing that with every book. I mean, not every book necessarily invites you to do that. So this will just be like a space where I can think my thoughts about books, That's all I want. So I'm writing down the 2 books that I have already finished so far in January 2021, and my first page of every month will be just a space where I list all the books and the date that I finished them. And I like kind of having that there so I can get an idea of why I was finishing books so quickly, and maybe take a look back and remember, oh, I didn't finish that book that week because there was a literal insurrection. So now, one of the things that I wanted to do is to take a picture of the covers of these books. Yes, you can print them out, but I wanted to take a picture, based on how it looked when I was reading it. So if I was reading it on my Kindle, I want a picture of the Kindle cover. Or if I was reading it in hardback, I want a picture of that book, where I was reading it, So I am printing out 2 photos with my Polaroid zip printer. I really love this. I recommend everybody get it. You can just print off iPhone photos, and the film has a sticky back, so you can stick it into a planner or a journal, or in your locker if you happen to have a locker. I am old, I do not have a locker. So it's just a really cool tool to have, and it's something that I've had for a couple of years and it really lasts. You just recharge it. It's good to go. You can buy replacement film. It's relatively cheap. So I'm just printing out the 2 book covers, and then I'm going to put them them into my journal on their pages. So the first book I'm going to be journaling through is The Library at Mount Char. And this is a book that I purchased a couple years ago, I think. I bought the ebook because somebody was talking about it on Twitter and how it was on sale and how it was a really cool read. And so I bought it downloaded to my Kindle, and then I completely forgot about it because that's kind of what happens. If I don't see it, it's hard to know that it's there. So I am doing a page for The Library at Mount Char. I am picking a piece of paper that kind of looks like one of those library return cards, but not really. Retrospectively, I think I do have those library card things, that they put in the little pocket in the back of the library book when you were in elementary school. I think I have a few of those somewhere, and I should have used those, but I forgot and I didn't. So here we are. So I'm just going to use this paper to make a heading for that page. And this book was really unexpected for me in that I hadn't really heard a lot about it. I knew that it was kind of a dark fantasy sort of situation, but that's all I really knew. And I am really happy that I read this, and I'm really happy I read it when I did, because it's kind of like one of those overarching stories that's really good. I would call it an urban fantasy. It's kind of like a multi-dimensional story, gods are interacting in our everyday life, and maybe the people who do become gods. So it's really interesting. I don't want to give you any spoilers, but if you haven't read it, I recommend picking it up. It was a joy to read, and it was one of those stories where I had no idea where this was going. Granted, I don't read that much fantasy, so at least not these days, not this type of fantasy, So it was kind of hard to see exactly where things were going, but I loved it, I really, really enjoyed this story. So the basic premise is that there is this library, and it's kind of in another dimension, and the kids that were raised there, they each have their own catalog, which kind of amounts to a different topic that they study, and our protagonist, Carolyn, gets the languages catalog, so she learns a ton of different languages. It's super interesting. The world was fantastic, and it took place in the world as we know it, but there was all this other dimensional stuff, so definitely recommend this book. Now it is time for the actual journaling. So I'm just going to write the day that I finished this book and where I read it on my Kindle and whether or not I owned it or checked it out from the library. Those are like the most important things I want to track, although it's not necessarily super duper relevant for me to track those things. I just kind of want to have it. Now, in my journal, I'm not necessarily writing full sentences. I'm not writing about how the books made me feel, unless they made me feel some kind of way, you know? I can't say that every entry is going to be the same. This book, for the most part, for me, was a very entertaining read, and I enjoyed it, and that's kind of where that ends, you know? I do think that there were elements of it that probably needed a bit of a trigger warning, if I'm being honest, but I think it was overall a good story, structurally sound, and, just really like unexpected read overall. I know I keep saying that and that's not super helpful, so I'm just kind of writing down things that I remember about it, though I can see in the future if I read another book that, fundamentally changes my worldview on stuff, like I might say a lot more. So for this, I'm not writing a whole awful lot. I'm just writing what I think is relevant, and I'm also going to do something that makes me feel very, very vulnerable, but I'm going to draw in my reading journal, and I just want to draw like little images that relate to the story that I remember from the story, like things that stood out to me. So this first one is a bull, and if you've read this book, you know why, but there's a big bronze bull that is referred to as a barbecue grill, but like there's a character that's roasted alive in it and then brought back to life. So I just thought it was like really important to put that bull there. And then I'm also drawing a pyramid, which if you've read the book, you know why, and I'm not going to give that away. So just having like those little sketches, the book cover, and like some of my notes about the book, I think that that's all I really need when it comes to my reading journal. The next book I read is a book called Lanny, and this was a book that was recommended to me by a YouTube commenter, and I really enjoyed this, and I was not expecting to, so I checked it out. And you know how like when you put a book on your Kindle, it takes forever to tell you like how much time is left in the book because it's like trying to figure out how fast you're going to read it, it's still downloading it, all that stuff. Well, it never got over like 2 hours, and I was like, what's going on here? So it's a really short read, and it goes really fast, but I think it's really important that you know that it's not formatted like your typical novel. So it's very stream of consciousness. It's really interesting, and it centers on this character named Lanny, who's a little boy, kind of like one of those sweet, sensitive, artistic little boys that, the world kind of destroys. And he lives in a country village in the UK with his mom and his dad, and this village is kind of haunted. I don't want to say haunted, but there's an urban legend of Dead Papa Toothwort. And I'm not going to say anything about Dead Papa Toothwort because that's for you to find out should you choose to read this book. But it was really good. There's a lot of, interesting images, and the way the story is told, like, I'm just going to say this, like, I enjoy the hell out of reading writers from the UK. There is a way that they handle emotion that I find refreshing. I don't know what it is, and honestly, like, I'm just thinking of this book and the terrible incident of the dog in the nighttime, if you guys remember that, and just like when characters get fed up, they just curse, and that's so refreshing because I live in the Bible Belt, and I have heard too many grown adults use like faux cuss words. Like, I used to work at a defense contracting firm, and things went really haywire one day, and somebody, like a former Army general, I believe, said hiney instead of ass, and I just thought that was stupid. Anyway, so I'm journaling my thoughts about Lanny, and I'm going to draw an image that stood out to me, which you'll understand if you've read the book. But yeah, this is my reading journal. So let me know in the comments if you like it, and make sure you're subscribed because I'll give you tons of more entries.